and hopefully we can get my presentation up. Does anybody got any questions before we start though? No? Great. How do I do this? Oh, there we go. Okay. I want to do the whole screen. All right, you guys see the screen over there?
I do have a question. Are you growing a beard or you just didn't shave?
I haven't shaved this week. I only shave like once a week now, but it's starting to go gray on me. So that's probably what's showing up in the camera so much.
Yeah,
I got their MA juice, right?
Yeah, mine never turned gray, just turned white.
So I've got, do you guys see like your people pictures there?
Yep.
I'm going to move those off screen real quick. You guys see the presentation though, right?
Yep.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Rotational fundamentals. This is the part 1 of the series. Part 2 is going to be, well, I'll explain what's going to happen in part 2. This one's pretty in depth, but I'm going to try to limit it to just kind of we'll explain as we go along. All right. So what does the fundamental say? And the fundamental says control the skis with rotation, turning, pivoting, steerings with leg rotation, separate from an upper body. And this is straight from the technical manual. I haven't seen it modified anywhere else. Does anybody notice anything about it? No? All right, cool. I like to look at the fundamentals as 2 parts. The first part is you control the skis rotation through leg rotation. And then the second part is going to be separate from the upper body. So that's kind of how I look at all the fundamentals, kind of like fore aft is, you have control the base of support through, control the base support, or I'm sorry, control the center of mass over the base support while directing pressure along the length of the skis. So that's kind of like a 2-part. It's same thing with ski to ski. All right, cool. What is everybody's understanding of the fundamental? Just kind of popcorn. If you got anything to say, go ahead and say it.
Well,
The focus is on leg rotation and not upper body rotation.
Okay, yeah. Anything else?
that leg rotation is independent of the upper body rotation.
Okay, cool. Anything else?
What it does not say is that there is no rotation of the upper body.
Yeah. Yeah, we always kind of like, that's like one of the things we didn't, I was kind of alluding to is what is this fundamental not say? We've always kind of said that, you know, we control ski rotation through leg rotation under a stable or disciplined upper body. We kind of always added that in, so much so that when I came back to it again, I was like, wait a minute, is this complete? Is this like what was actually said? And, you know, as you kind of get into it and start thinking about it, I think PSIA does these, makes these fundamentals like tremendously open-ended so that there is no, there are preferred methods that we do stuff, but we don't necessarily do them all like that all the time. You know, we have tactical decisions that we make that change, you know, what we do as far as movements are concerned. So they kind of leave it purposely open so we can address those movements also. So I did, that was one of the first things I noticed was it didn't say under stable or disciplined or non-moving upper body or anything like that. So Anything
It also-
else?
It also doesn't say change direction. I mean, that's the
No.
whole purpose of.
No, it doesn't say change direction, right? But isn't that kind of what the ultimate outcome is,
Yeah,
right? We want to if we want to go over there, we want to point our skis over there. It just is like really fundamental. I mean, really kind of like really open-ended. So and then of course, level 1 understanding versus level 2 understanding. I don't think that needs a whole lot of things to talk about other than, you know, the skis. We control the skis where they go is kind of like what level 1 is through some kind of rotation, and level 2 is where we start to kind of introduce a little bit of the understanding of separation without really indicating why. And there's going to be a lot of kind of information today, kind of sporting information along those lines. I'm not going to tremendously get into the biomechanics. That's going to save that for the part 2 series. And then that's going to be like the deep dive into biomechanics. So, all right. Anything else?
Might you just go back to the differences you think are evident between 1 and 2?
Part 1 and part 2.
No, level 1, level 2, understanding.
Level 1 understanding is we do something that makes the skis change directions.
Mhm.
Preferably, hopefully they understand that it's leg rotation,
Right.
but they also recognize, I mean, level 1 has a lot more along the lines of edges or wedges,
Mhm.
wedge turning all the way up to and including wedge Christies.
Right.
And then level 2 is definitely all the way up through basic parallels and maybe some dynamic parallels. And that's where we really got to start talking about separation of upper and lower bodies.
Yep. Okay.
And they should have a strong understanding that by this time that you should have leg rotation. Cool.
But even in a wedge turn, you still have separation of the upper and lower body.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. But is that really the level 1 understanding? I know that Ski Mac and I have to do like level 3 wedge turns, where we have to display all fundamentals at all times, and leg turning is definitely one of those. So, all right, anything else? All right, so I'm going to go on to what does the technical manual say? Rotation control refers to turning of the skis about a vertical axis of the body. Skiers use this action to affect the direction of your skis. There you go. There's where you're to point those skis in the direction you want to go thing, Jerry Ann. Rotational movements can originate from different parts within the body. It's not always the legs or the torso or the hips or any of the other things. And to be effective, rotating the legs requires a strong, stable, or quiet upper body to turn against. And you have to kind of dig a little deeper, but that is actually in the part where they talk about leg rotation as a tactic. That's where that stable and quiet upper body comes from. So it's in the technical manual. Can't ignore it, right?
Mhm.
Any questions? Anything to add? No? All right, so what do others say? FWDI, Far West Development Initiative. This is kind of a Ron Kipp and et al. Racing group put together. They have like their own little manual, which looks kind of like this. And it's really, really good. And I highly encourage you to get it because it's a different take on how the fundamentals work. It's almost exclusively about racing, but there is a lot of overlap that happens. They just say different words. Upper body faces down the hill will be present throughout the turn. And the reality is if the legs are turning into pelvis, the upper body pelvis is turning over the legs.
Can you explain that? Because I'm not understanding what that means.
We're going to get into that a little bit later.
Okay.
Okay. Ron Kipp also says there's a fascination of technique over function. This came from one of his presentations he does. And there's our beautiful picture of Stein over there with his extreme counter.
That's crazy.
I know. Beautiful skier, loved it. That's where my father used to get that. Skis got to stay together all the time. Upper body muscles, Dan and Ron. The upper body, this is part of the Dan and Ron show. Upper body muscles are innervated prior to turning the lower body rotation. We'll get into that a little bit more. Innervated means to engage or to tense. Ron Lemaster, leg rotation is the most important technique used today to turn the skis. And a preferred method in most situations is twisting one or both legs in the hips. Encyclopedia Bob. You guys know the difference between the two Bob Barneses, right? There's Encyclopedia Bob, and then there's a Bob who is a former ski school director at Winter Park. They will both pop up in this presentation, so I just got to put it out there. All right. Encyclopedia Bob, I believe, he teaches at Aspen, and he's like 25 years on the technical group out of Rocky Mountain. So he's an insanely good skier, but he's the one that did that encyclopedia of skiing. And a rotary skill comprises of movements that twist, steer, or pivot the skis and or affect rotational angular motion in the skier system. And then he also says rotation actually describes a family of related movements, all based on the laws of conformation of momentum. All right, any questions?
Well, I
Lots
think
of
you're
words.
gonna need to translate all of these,
Why would I want to do that?
because
There
I
we go, that's it.
asked.
I'm going too far. We're going to get into like a whole lot of this. So the law of conservation of momentum is Newton's third law. All actions have an equal and opposite reaction. Force is not invented. It has to be redirected, or it cannot be, it's not made out of thin air. Things like that. If you know the laws, and you can get it. You can look them up yourselves, but we'll talk about them a little bit more, okay? Because the one that's really important here when we start talking about rotation is definitely the third law, which is for every action that we have, there is an equal and opposite reaction, which means twisting our legs in space does not mean that there's not something happening somewhere else. Don't worry, Rebecca, I got you. All right, ready? All right. The simplistic rotation, counter rotation, that uses a horizontal plane, which is also called the equatorial, transverse, orbital planes. Also, all rotation requires an anchor or fulcrum to rotate against, or they are true counter rotation. If we anchor one part, it's easy for us to move the other part. If we don't anchor either of the parts, we twist one direction, something's got to twist the other. Understand? This is that part of that conversation about Newton's third law. Rotation always involves counter rotation or rotary push off to create an anchor to push against. Counter rotation, rotational push off, where we anchor one part, either the upper part or the lower part. Cool. We either twist up here or we twist down here.
Are you saying that rotary push off, just to reiterate, requires of the two pieces, I'm going to use that one has to be absolutely stable? And
Rotary, in this particular case, rotary push off is considered an anchor.
okay,
When we are putting the ski on edge and we want to go from one side to the other, we are anchoring the skis so that we can twist against something somewhere else. Okay, We have to create torque. In order for us to create torque, we have to have an anchor in order for it to do against.
And that's your,
Otherwise, it becomes true counter rotation.
and is that what you mean by for every reaction, there's an equal and opposite reaction?
Unfortunately, in skiing, we cannot ignore the fact that there is an action and a reaction.
Mm-hmm.
How we handle that is the key.
Okay.
Okay.
So let me ask something. Does
Yeah.
that mean that we either initiate the turn by rotating the legs or by rotating the shoulders, but not the whole body rotation? Because one, it has to be one part or the other, because one is anchored.
It could be
Does
one
that-
part is anchored, and how we anchor it is going to be a key, or another part is anchored, or it can be a little bit of both. It can be a little bit of both. We can combine upper and lower body twist against each other. That's one of the tactics that we'll talk about later. That's the true counter rotational
On the
tactic.
previous, on the previous slide, there was a statement, I think it might have been the Dan and Ron statement that spoke to this, which was the innervating of core muscles, right, prior to the lower body rotation. So to me, that's what that meant, was your core muscles engage first, and then you're rotating your legs.
Yes. You're getting ahead of me. You're stealing the show.
All right, I'll mute.
Lower body rotates relative to the upper body. In simplistic terms, the pelvis rotates on the femur, and the femur rotates in the pelvis, or a little bit of both. This is a femur rotating underneath a stable pelvis, or a stable pelvis rotating over a femur pelvis rotating over a stable femur, or it could be a little bit of both.
Gumby, I've heard the Toms say that leg rotation actually, we're basically using the contact with the snow, and the snow is the fulcrum to rotate the legs. You heard them talk about that?
Yes. Yes, it's not always true, but yes,
Okay.
because you're creating a friction point, right? That's a friction point, and we can
Mhm.
rotate against that friction point.
Yeah.
Yeah, but sometimes when the skis are flat, we lose that friction point. But we still have this ability to twist. And we're going to get into that, okay? The
Okay.
little bit of biomechanics I'm going to talk about, we'll talk about that, okay? Cool. Everybody have any other questions? All right, groovy. All right, we've got to define what the upper lower body. I know for most of you guys, this is pretty rudimentary. The upper body is everything that is the pelvis and above, which is above the red line, and everything from the lower body is considered anything that is from the hip bone, from the femur on down. But this is the one that I bring this up in a lot of MAs. What confuses people is that there's an overlap between them. And what's the widest part of this whole area down here? Here's a little bit more, but what's the widest part down here?
The heads of the femurs.
Yeah, the heads of the femurs, right? So when we're seeing somebody skiing down the hill in MA, what part of the body do we usually look at? We're looking at the pelvis. Are we looking at the front part, the panel part, or are we looking at the hips on the outside a lot of times? And we may have trained our eyes by now to look for the panel. And we go, okay, well, the panel's not moving much, so the pelvis is not moving much. But we also see a lot of twisting happening in the femur heads. Are happening because the legs are twisting and it looks like the hips are twisting. So that was the whole point of that, is just beware of that. There is an overlap, and that the actual pelvic bone is quite higher than we think it is. And it's not the widest part, especially on females.
I like this diagram because it makes it pretty clear when we talk about upper and lower body. And I think most people get confused between the femur and I'm going to call it the pelvis as to where does one start and where does one end.
Yes.
And I think your chart
Yeah, this
it-
makes it very clear where it's at, right?
Yep, good stuff.
All right, cool. All right, so what does it look like? And I think all of you can agree to these. Upper body rotates less than the lower body throughout the turn, creating a countered relationship. Upper body is that fabulous upper to lower body separation. Ideally, both legs and skis rotate at the same time, same speed, same rate, and ideally probably same duration. Okay, that's that dirt feature. Looking up this is straight from FWDI. Looking up the front of the torso, the pelvis should be showing more or less. And more or less is that euphemism, right? It should be showing more or less. Okay. The pelvis is the most critical thing you should be looking at.
When you talk about the torso and the pelvis,
Yes.
could you go back to that chart and show what you mean by torso? You mean that, are you talking about the upper body?
The upper
Or are
body,
you
yes.
Okay,
So the torso is basically everything from the shoulders down to the pelvis.
yep, okay, just
Okay.
double
And
check.
they should be ideally operating as one unit.
Mhm.
That's the ideal. Okay. Or the understanding we're going to be adopting today. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Counter requires that the pelvis rotates on top of the femur bone. And leg rotation requires the femur bones rotate under the pelvis. Confusing?
I never thought
Yeah,
about it.
say that again.
Counter requires that the pelvis rotates on top of the femur bone. Oops. And leg rotation requires that the femur bones rotate under the pelvis.
And so I have a question about this because since in a circle, if we're rotating in an arc, essentially the inside ski travels less than the outside ski.
Yes.
So essentially they cannot really be at the same speed and the same rate because one has to go kind of faster than the other to maintain the same distance. Does that make
Yes.
sense?
Yes. I think the twisting part is at the same rate and speed. But yes, one travels a greater distance than the other one does. I'm going to leave it at that. Right. So here's our famous little round kip thing. Here's our rotation. One of them is, of course, the leg rotating over a stable pelvis, where the pelvis is the nut. The other one is where the pelvis is rotating over the stable femurs. And just as an illustration, because I love this one, here is Michael Rogan showing counter and how the pelvis rotates over a stable leg. And you can get, if you guys want to stand up and try this, you stand like this, put it on one leg, and then you kind of rotate over the stable leg. And there's your counter. Oh, my GIF stopped. Did the GIF work?
Yeah,
Do these GIFs work? Or are they kind of,
It's working. We can see him.
yeah,
He's screwing around.
yeah, he's screwing around.
Good,
Exactly.
Jerry.
So anyway, I always thought this was fascinating when I saw this the first time. I go, oh man, this really does a beautiful job of illustrating what counter does or how counter works. I love it.
Play it again, Sam.
Which one? I'm talking about Michael Rogan.
Yeah,
right here.
Rogan. He looks
Yeah.
so fat in this.
He looks so fat.
Yeah, it
I
looks
think
like he's
this
got a
was-
big beer belly here.
This is from a couple of years ago. So this was during COVID.
I see the COVID-19, huh?
Yeah, he didn't go to Portillo this last
Yeah.
2 years.
Yeah, he's there now.
Yeah. He's
I
been,
see. Got
been
it.
all over the place. All right, cool. So what else does it look like? And I have a video. Whip. Everybody see the video? Here's Barnsey number 2.
Hmm.
So everybody kind of notice what's happening there? I'm gonna go ahead and go back up here to the beginning. So you guys notice what's happening to the pelvis and the upper body,
It's really hard for me to see. That's,
isn't it?
yeah, like, this is the part I don't get with MA is what am I looking at?
The upper body is not moving at all.
Well, the upper body is actually moving, but it's not moving. Let's go back a little bit, and we're gonna
Okay.
get to this here in a second, but
Yeah, yes.
watch how the upper body twists a little bit, right?
Yes, I stand corrected. But look how
Yeah.
disciplined it, listen, look how disciplined it is.
That's insane, isn't it?
It's
Crazy amount.
So you can see
Beautiful
his side
illustration.
pockets.
Yeah,
That would be the upper body, the limitation of the upper body rotation. But when
Yes.
you're talking about looking at the femurs rotating, looks to me like his hips are rotating. That's the part that's confusing.
yeah, it's very confusing, isn't it? And I'm gonna show you why. Here's some more. You cannot tell me there's not some upper body rotation there. But this, the illustration here is how the upper body how the lower body leg rotation is happening, right? That's really what they're looking for.
Well, the thing is that if you're changing direction, the upper body does have to sort of move a little bit.
Bingo.
And our hips have to move a little bit too, because you can't physically move there just isn't space for you to
Exactly.
move legs.
Exactly. There is a limit to how much you can internally and externally rotate your legs. It depends on your personal how flexible you are, That's the only way I can say it, right? Flexitivity, there is no word for that, is there?
It's
Depends on how flexible you are.
flexibility.
Flexibility, there you go. With using the entire leg, you have about 45 to 80 degrees of internal abduction rotation. That means you can rotate your legs inward, this way. You have about 60 to 80 degrees of rotation outwards. Okay. And again, it really depends on your flexibility. Some people are going to be way less flexible. Obviously, Bob Barnes is crazy flexible because he was getting a lot of that. If you're just talking about femoral rotation, you only get about 45 degrees in each direction. You can only rotate the femur bone in the hip sockets about 45 degrees in each direction. So where does that extra rotation come from? Any ideas?
The knees.
Flexing the knees, hips and ankles.
Yeah. You have to get it somewhere, and it usually comes from the lower body. And nobody wants, I'm sorry, from the lower leg. So it's going to be coming from the knees and the ankles are going to where that extra is going to come from, right? So we could twist, I could twist my leg about 45 degrees in either direction, probably not quite as far when I'm abducting, going outwards as I can going inwards. But I can get a lot more if I twist my leg out. Okay. And I can get a lot more if I twist my foot in, right? I get a tremendous amount of rotation that way. What
Hey.
happens when we reach the end of our, reach the end? What has to give?
Upper body.
You have to give with the hip pelvis. And even in the photo that you're looking here with this girl here, who's showing kind of like the limits, you could see that her pelvis is shifting. And it's in her zipper. The zipper's
That
not straight up
Robin
and down.
Barnes?
Huh?
That looks like Robin Barnes.
It does look like Robin Barnes. I didn't even think about that. I think
So
I
does,
got this picture from Ron Lemaster's book.
so does this go back to an athletic stance, right? And the flexibility of an athletic stance as opposed to just standing tall, straight, stiff?
Yes. And I'm glad you said something about that because it's right here in my notes. If you have straight legs, it robs you of your ability to turn your legs more. If you bend your knees and flex your ankles, you get much, much more limit. You get more you get more spread. You get be able to move more in both directions and maintain stability. Because
And
as
you
soon as you get to it, you can't reach a point where you lose your ability to be stable. You've rotated so much, you lose your ability to move and be stable.
When your legs are flexed, or your knees are flexed, you're using different muscles to do the rotation. You're using your abductors and your thighs. When you're straight, you're using your gluteus medius, a much smaller muscle up higher on the hip.
Yep. Cool. Any questions?
No, just a comment. Hey, Chuck,
Yeah.
first two bullet points.
Yeah.
Right after the word adduction and abduction for each. Can you just put the word leg so that it reads leg rotation?
Yeah, I can put that in there. Sure. Internal. Oh, I got a capital letter there. I do that so often. I
For
just change
clarity.
everything. There you go. That seem better? All right, cool. Next. Ooh. So we're going to go back to this again. We're going back to the technical manual. We have to talk about these things. There are many, many common tactics that we do. There's lots of ways to create torque, twist, and rotate our skis, okay, under our bodies, or rotate our bodies to get the two keys to twist. One of those two. There's many, many ways to do it. Bob Barnes has 5, and the technical manual has 4. And the reason why we call these tactics is because it's not that they're bad. We just don't want to do 3 of them all the time. You know what I mean? So of course, the first one is that famous UBR. Upper body creates a torque relationship, which translates to the lower body, but you still need an anchor to twist against. And that's part of that rotary push-off thing, where you're creating some friction point from your skis so you can get a twist. Did that answer your question, Jeff, from previously?
Yes, sir.
There you go. Counter rotation. I think we have all frequently experienced where we have to get a very fast turn in and we twist our body one way so that we pull our legs the other way. It's very effective when we're in the air, as Donnie used to say. We do that all the time. And I've just added this in. It's a balanced opposition of both upper and lower body. So it's not dependent upon an anchor point. It's nice if we have one, but it's not dependent on one. Cool. Then, of course, our leg rotation separate from our upper body. And we're going to get into this. Legs rotate against each other and against the pelvis, independent leg rotation. And then the last one is the outside agency. And Bob Barnes divided this is Encyclopedia Bob. He divided it into two parts. He had the pole plant, the blocking pole plant as one of them. And he had like a whole section on the blocking pole plant. You can look it up. Then he had another whole section on deflection. So deflection is where we use the snow to help our skis change direction, usually through bumps or terrain features or things like that. And then, of course, the blocking pole plant is we use that where we stab the pole into the ground, give ourselves a third point of contact in the snow, which allows us to torque our body kind of like a wrench, or we can stop rotation by putting our, if we're rotating too much, we can stop the rotation of our upper body using a blocking pole plant. And if you guys want to read more about that, I would encourage you to do so because they're very effective tactics. Blocking pole plants, when I was growing up, were what you did in bumps. It was like a requirement. Use that blocking pole plant on each side, right? Now they don't do that as much because they really want to emphasize that lower leg turns before you use before you use something that modifies your upper body. All right. And we're going to go through, and later on, we're going to go through like the advantages and disadvantages of each one of these. Cool. Any questions? Bam. So you guys have go back to your level 2s when you were passing your level 2. You guys remember the times we were talking about sequential and simultaneous leg movements? And simple nod up and down is fine. No? Yeah. We had sequential and simultaneous edge movements. We had sequential and simultaneous turning of the skis, right? Okay. So we're going to start talking about the biomechanics of what happens when we are trying to achieve simultaneous leg movements. And basically what happens is we have to innervate our upper body, which means we got to create tension. Jerry Yang talked about it. We kind of do that through our core. That stabilizes, it disciplines, it quiets the upper body. Then the fact that we are twisting one leg in one direction, the other leg in the other direction creates an opposite twisting effect, which helps stabilize the pelvis. Does that make sense to everybody?
I have a question because
Yes.
if they're simultaneous, and in your prior slide, you said like, I forget which is which, but adduction is like 45 degrees and abduction is 80 degrees. So how can you really go simultaneous when one side, like one movement can go a lot further than the other? Do you understand what I'm asking?
Yes, I do understand what you're asking. And the question I have for you is, how often do we use the Bob Barnes's tactic in real skiing? Because most of the time when we're skiing, we're only going from one 45-degree action to another 45-degree action. If we're going in short turns, it's even smaller. And most bumps, we only go from 35 to 35, which is not that far.
So what you're saying is we're not using the whole range of motion and therefore
No.
we
We
can
don't.
do.
Yeah, we don't use the whole range of motion all the time. That would be very fatiguing, and I'm sure we'd probably hurt something if we did that. What I'm trying to make the point here is that because we have the red there, you got one arrow going one direction, you got the other arrow going the other direction. They're twisting against each other, but the other leg's doing the opposite. And so that stabilizes the pelvis, which allows for those legs to rotate. So it's not just that the legs, both of them rotate as a unit, but those independent leg rotations what allows you to stabilize the pelvis. Otherwise, what happens is we have what we call sequential movements, which is there's something, you have to have something to anchor against, and one leg will rotate first, which will cause the destabilize and cause the pelvis to torque. And that's where you get your sequential movement from. So it starts on one side, travels across the pelvis until it reaches the other side. And then we bring it back to here again.
Can you go back to the slide before this?
Yes.
I'm a little bit confused because you said
Yeah, it's very confusing. Go ahead.
what I see is the pelvis moving in one direction.
Mhm.
I'm going to say to the right, and the legs moving both legs moving to the left. Is that incorrect?
It's not that they're moving, but that's where the forces are moving.
Okay.
Okay. So the whole point is that even though the legs are moving this way, the
Yep.
pelvis is stabilized because the fact that the legs are moving this way, they're counteracting any forces that are happening on the pelvis.
So in this slide, are the legs actually moving to the left and the forces are in
Yes.
the pelvis moving to the right?
The skis are moving to the left and the force, because you have an equal and opposite reaction. There has to have something happening.
Yep,
If you
yep.
don't, if you move both of them at the same time, it keeps your pelvis stable because they act against each other. Does that make sense?
So you have really three dynamics. You have the forces moving opposite the feet and the pelvis as a result staying stable.
Yeah, we have snow forces and we have other things too. But the fact
Yeah.
that we have stabilized it by flexing our muscles in our core, and that also helps stabilize that too. But we're not getting the kind of torque that's happening when we go to this. If we move
Right.
one leg and we twist one leg before the other, or we twist our upper body, that destabilizes your pelvis and causes skis to move in a sequential manner.
What is that top red arrow? What is that signifying?
That's signifying pressure that's coming at you or force that's coming at you. That's causing
Okay.
one ski to turn more before the other.
Okay.
And it's kind of like deflection.
Yep. Gotcha.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is that force causes the twist to happen in your
Mhm.
pelvis. And then it rotates around and it helps you affect the other ski.
Yeah.
And we see
It might
that
be
a lot.
helpful to label forces, pressure, as opposed, because when I first looked at the first chart and I was following what you said, I said, well, the feet are turning at the same time, but I don't understand. But I see it now. And I think it's
Yeah.
just a question of labeling.
Okay. I'll keep that in mind. I'll put some labels on there. So one leg rotates first, deflection, or there is an upper body twist. We say it results in destabilizing and causing pelvic torque. We see this in a wedge, stem, or rotary pulse shaft, which are all forms of split rotation.
Mm-hmm.
And also another form of split rotation is where we turn one faster or more forcefully than the other two. Because that's part of that equal and opposite problem that we have. We want to have a stable, secure upper body. We have to rotate our legs at the same time. So what does it feel like? Hopefully all of you have felt these before. Femoral bones are rotating in the hip sockets. Should feel your hot thighs rotating. Built up of tension in the hip joint as we create rotation, as we rotate against the upper body. And tension is released when the legs are allowed to realign. Does it make sense? Oops, I'm sorry. I did the wrong one. Okay. I got two sets of slides up here. I got the ones with my notes and I got the ones with the things over here. So what does it feel like? You should feel your thighs rotating. you should be able to look down and see the thighs pointing in new directions, away from where your body's pointed. You should feel that tension. A lot of you probably do feel the tension in the hip as it builds up. So we twist against the upper body. That's another feature of having our muscles tensed or innervated. So why is rotation important?
Change direction.
Yeah, you beat me to it. No rotation, no turn. It's really hard to turn your skis when you don't rotate them. And most of you probably know this by now. You really want to point those skis in where you want to go. Otherwise, it's not much fun. Except in pure carving, where we're using, the ski performance to do all the turning for us. We need to point our skis in a direction we want to go if we want skis to travel there. And this is all about it. This indicates intent too. Does it make sense? But even when we're doing pure carving, I mean, we're not all just getting into there and what do they like to call it, the park and ride. We're not always parking and riding, right? We can change the radius of the turn as we need to. And part of that involves rotation. And we'll be talking about a lot of that in part 2. Why else? Well, frankly, all movements of the body require some form of skeletal or muscular rotation. It's hard for us to change directions without rotation. Rotational movements help us align our muscular skeletal structure that is most efficient in resisting outside forces. And some ski movements require the creation or use of torque to stop or start rotation. Any questions on those? All right, we'll move on. How is it done? Summarize ideally, we're just going to kind of quickly summarize what we've been talking about. We stabilize the upper body pelvis to give something that the legs can rotate against. Legs rotate simultaneous and independently separated from the upper body. Medial and lateral leg rotation is countered by lateral and medial pelvis rotation. There you go, Jeff. Abduction for abduction and upper versus lower.
Yep.
Okay. Proper rotation requires that you rotate both legs against the upper body, and we're talking about them independently, not just one unit. We're talking about them rotating like this. They have to rotate against each other. Torque of the legs rotating the opposite direction simultaneously in the pelvis reduces the demand, the upper body anchoring, 2-axis rotation, and significantly helps keep the pelvis from rotating. And I almost wish that Ron had done something like where he showed 2 bolts rotating on top of or 2 on top of a nut and in the nuts to show that if you twist one, it would twist it around, but if you twist both, the nuts stay. And I don't know, I have to invent some kind of anchoring thing to show how that works. But I thought that's like really cool to me. All right, otherwise you need to create a force to start leg rotation, UBR, usually starting on one side, you get a sequential movement. Pelvis rotates as the force travels across from one leg to the other. Rotating one leg before, more or less than the other, increases the torque demands on the pelvis, which is what causes the pelvis to move. And we get the split rotation and sequential movements. That's a lot of words. Anybody like the word salad there? All right, but the key part of this is we must anchor tension the upper body prior to dual leg rotation. Have to give them something to resist against. So how do most of our guests turn? And what should they do instead? And why is it so easy to get it wrong? I don't know. Is it really fear? Fear, I think, is as a key point in everything. What do most of our guests do? What do we see?
Upper body rotation.
A lot of upper body rotation, right?
But I don't think that fear is what promotes upper body rotation. I think upper body rotation is because if you're not in the right position, you don't have too many choices to initiate the turn.
Yeah, cool.
Yep.
It's
Love
not
that.
fear.
I
No.
could not have said that any better myself. That's
I would,
brilliantly put.
I would agree it's fear because you're going down and you're afraid you can't turn. So then you get the quickest and the most expedient. I don't trust my skis. I'm not really sure this is going to happen. So I'm going to push it along.
And I'm gonna die.
Yep,
Yeah, I'm gonna
absolutely.
die. Exactly. If I don't, those trees are coming at me very, very fast, right?
One's a function of the other. They're symbiotic. They're mutually inclusive.
I think when we're talking about skiing, fear plays a part always, right? It always does. But I mean, beyond, I mean, all of these are, I made up a lot of these, but I mean, I think it really is. They don't know any better. And it seems like the easiest thing to do. And the reason why I say that, I mean, when I watch people like rollerblade or ice skate, what's the first thing they do when they try to turn? They use their upper body, man. I got to twist. I got to go this way. Why aren't they going this way? And so it's just, I think really is kind of ends up being that's the understanding. And then again, of course, I always say when you're sitting on a lift and you're watching people come down, you're like, oh yeah, look at that. Look how he's doing that. And then that's where it gets started and reinforced. And they don't have any understanding of how it works. And then in some cases, it could be a tactical intent. Because like I said, all four of those things that we showed before are perfectly valid in a situation that you run into. We don't always rotate the legs underneath the stable upper body. There are some times where that ain't happening. We got to do something different. I threw this in because I think this is kind of relevant. It's why we teach the wedge versus direct to parallel. My experiences is about somewhere between 25 and 30% of my guests will be, depending on what they've done before, are going to be savvy to direct to parallel, but the ones that are not, don't have a lot of athletic experience or are not athletically inclined are going to benefit from the wedge. And these are some reasons why, because the wedge is easy to teach because, it's easy to teach because it's easy to understand. It's easy for the body to model. And, especially with children, it's easy for children to figure out that they can rotate the skis in. It's way harder to get you to learn to rotate the skis out. Because one side of your muscles in your legs are stronger and more developed than the others. It mimics walking movements or turning when we're walking. And it's easier to do mirrored movements as opposed as other than opposing movements where we're trying to do what we're talking about. This is actually like, this is not easy to learn to do, right? Any questions on this? Because I get this question all the time, especially from where I teach at Snow Creek, we're a direct parallel, and they're always like, well, why don't you teach direct parallel? Well, because I'm looking at my guests and I know that they're going to be, just from the movements they're doing, the wedge is going to be the best option for them. I want to get them moving. I want them getting down the hill safely.
I never knew that. And so that's a pretty good explanation.
Yeah.
Chuck, the other thing I always say is with your feet wide apart and pointed inward, you've just increased the size of your base of support exponentially. So it's a lot harder for your center of mass to fall outside of that, which is going to make you fall over.
Yeah, I mean, the argument between wedges and direct parallels, all we're doing is kicking the can down the road, right? We go to direct to parallel, problems show up later. Yeah, sure, we're getting them turning faster sooner or with making parallel turns, but how they're doing it, I'm going to go back to our famous UVR because most of them are doing it using some kind of upper body rotation. And the wedge kind of helps you combat that because it creates a stable shape and you don't need as much upper body rotation in order to turn the skis.
Yeah, and you have to rotate the legs within the pelvis to make a wedge.
Yeah, exactly. It's just easier. All right, I just thought I'd throw that in there. So back to our tactics again. So the 4 twisting, turning, pivoting actions. And this is, of course, 5 if you talk to Bob Barnes. Upper body rotation. Advantages, it's intuitive. It's easy to understand. Everybody does it. It looks safe. It works. The disadvantages is oversteers the skis. You get Z shapes. Slow, big twisting movements because you have to twist the body first and then it's got to travel downstream and that takes time. It's very defensive, which why it makes people feel safe. It moves the body position up, inside and back. Counter rotation. Whoops. It's an immediate, strong rotational movement. It's very fast. If you're into bumps and I need to make a really fast turn, I'm going to be using counter rotation. It's also kind of intuitive and effective tactic. The disadvantage is that the upper body loses stable relationship. The pelvis twists. It must rotate back to position before rotating to the other side. And then of course it stops at your end of range of, at the end of range of motion. You can only twist so far. But if I twist my body this way, 45 degrees, I can only twist my body so far this way. Where normally I could go almost all the way to 45 degrees here, I'm not getting that range of motion I used to. But this is something that Ron Kipp said. Counter rotation, if you slow it down and draw it out, this is what we refer to as leg rotation. So they're very closely related to leg rotation. It's how we create the anchor. Do we do it through our upper body or create an anchor there and then do simultaneous leg movements? Or do we try to twist the body one way to get the skis to go the other? Of course, here's the leg rotation. Advantages is the most versatile and effective in most skiing situations, can be quick and explosive, i.e. counter rotation, as well as slow and constant source of rotation for C-shaped turns. It also involves anticipation or helps you do anticipation. That's kind of that upper and lower body separation again. The legs are turning against the upper body. Disadvantages is that it's not obvious intuitive at first. It has to be taught. You have to learn to do it. I'm still trying to learn to do it in rollerblades. Hard because in rollerblades, I don't have, the only stable position I have is the feet in contact with the ground, or the rollerblades on contact to ground. So I have to twist one leg to get the other one to twist, right? And it's hard. Outside influence again, blocking pole plant helps produce torque and stabilize the upper body. At the same time, it can also unstabilize the upper body pretty effectively. Deflection, change in direction resulting from the nose push against the skis, i.e. moguls or terrain features. Obviously, we can get, if we're not anticipating that, that can also affect our skiing too. But this is a little illustration that Barzy had in his encyclopedia, blocking pole plant. Pushes on a pole, which transmits force through the lever arm, producing torque that twists the skier and skis.
Would it be fair to say that in order to effectively use deflection, many times you have to have good leg rotation?
Yes. Good early leg rotation.
Yes, and that's what causes the deflection.
Yeah.
Because maybe you're aiming for a bump or around a bump or whatever.
Yeah, or anticipating hitting a bump or something like that. Yeah.
Jeff, can you repeat? Jeff, can you repeat that first part? What is,
What I was thinking was that when you deflect, you're really hitting against something, right? You're using the snow to move you in a direction. But a lot of times where you want to go, you have to be able to rotate your legs to hit that bump or to hit that obstacle or to hit that snow. And therefore deflection is just not all that straightforward in terms of, okay, now I'm going to deflect. You usually have to do something, is what I would think. Does that make sense, Ski Mac?
Yeah, I saw him nodding. Oops, you're on mute. Ski Mac, you're on mute. I can't unmute him. Oh, there we go. Now I
there
get
we
to
go.
start over again.
yeah, I thought I unmuted and then I looked away. So I think there's more than just that fundamental that comes in play. To my mind, it's also foot to foot and pressure along the length of the ski. So to be able to flex your ankles.
Yep.
It's not just leg rotation that helps with the deflection or influences the deflection. I think all of them do in one way or
Yeah.
another.
Yeah, I know you're correct. I like that. We don't think about edging our skis and bumps. We think about rotating them, don't we? But as a consequence, we get rotation. We get, hopefully, outside ski pressure by creating that countered relationship.
Yeah.
That's the lie they tell us anyway, right? All right, visual cues for ineffective rotary movements. How many of these have you seen? I really like the guy in the middle, man. That's like one of my guys.
Yeah. How many of these have we done?
It's like how much snow's on him. He's definitely one of my students. All right. Ineffective rotary movement. We have shoulders and torsos twist first, initiating at initiate. Oh, God, great. You gotta love that. Oops, hold on. Got a spelling error. Do you think I'd be better than this? I'm surprised I got anything like even spelled correctly. There you go. Oh, wait a minute, I had it right. First to initiate the turning of the legs. Yeah, okay. One leg ski turns or steps before the other at initiation. Skis pivot and skid throughout the turn. Skis turn quickly over turning and not turning in quickly enough, which is under turning. And then for the more advanced cues, large upper body swing at initiation, that could be in both directions. It could be like a large counter rotation, or it could be just a simple upper body rotation. We see a lot of squaring up at the end of turns where you have to create some. If you don't do it at the end of the turn, if you don't have a counted relationship to the end of turn, you got to do something to get your skis to start the other direction. Body follows the movement of the skis. We see that quite often. And defensive movements such as turning away from the direction of travel. Anybody got anything else that could add to this? I know, I used them all up, didn't I?
I think also it
All
can
came
lead
from
to
this, by the way.
real
Well, not all of
pronounced
them, but a lot of them.
metronome type of movement side to
Yeah,
side.
yeah, yeah. Any others? No?
Could you talk a little bit about skis pivot or skid throughout the turn? Because a little bit of it just depends on what you're actually doing, that you may want to skid through a turn, not throughout, but through a part of a turn.
I'm not gonna lie to you. I think that is a tactic that a lot of people do. And it really comes down to whether it's offensive or defensive, or if it's on purpose, or if that's their intent.
Mhm.
because an upper body twist, one of the things that happens when you do an upper body twist, you cause the body to go upright and inside and back, which puts you in a kind of compromised position where you're on the inside ski. So the outside ski is going to skid a lot because it doesn't have a lot of purchase. And our weight is between the two. That's kind of where that skidding is coming from. Does that make
But
sense?
I thought that pivoting is turning.
Pivoting is turning, but it comes down to how fast it pivots and where the pivot's coming from. Let's see if there was anything else on that. Directional movements, pressure. Oops. Hold on, I gotta go to the ineffective side here.
So are you talking
use
about
pivot.
bad? Are you talking about having bad dirt in a pivot that when you say
Yes.
skis pivot?
Yeah, what it probably should say is, well, yeah, they have one little thing here which says creating Z-shaped turns. Skis pivot and skid throughout the turn, creating Z-shaped turns. So what it probably should say is skis, oops. Probably ought to say skis pivot quickly. Oh, I wish I could do this right. Or skid throughout the turn. Like a long finish.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's and skid throughout the turn.
Yeah, I kind of like the word and too. Skis pivot quickly and skid throughout the turn. You're mostly skidding, aren't you? Not really using most of the guests we have are not really using the design of the ski. They're using the edges to help them from going too fast.
And it's skidding, the tail is skidding predominantly.
And I'm going to say that's not because they're putting pressure on the tail so they can finish a turn, but instead that they're up and back, which takes pressure off the outside ski.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
you're getting that really nice split step the girl on the right has.
I like what you wrote when you say skis pivot quickly, because it now feels like an oh shit, I got to do something moment.
Yeah, there's an instructor over at Snow Creek. He always calls it the oh shit moment,
Mhm.
where your skis are directly down the hill, and that's the part that scares everybody because skis are pointed down the hill, they're going to accelerate, and you're going to end up being back if you don't go with them. So they end up having to do something. And his thing is, well, you just got to continue doing what you're doing, which is turn the skis. But in a lot of cases, they're like, oh, I hit that oh shit moment. Now I got to do something to get them to turn faster. Right? That goes back to that fear thing. All right. Any other questions?
So that's the Z shape that you're talking
Yeah,
about.
Z-shaped turns, exactly. Quick pivot. Quick pivot. I think I say something about it. Yeah, here it is. Here's our outcomes. Z-shaped turns. Skis thrust quickly sideways. Skis pivot quickly, but not under toes. No shape or control or finish or completion phases. Incomplete turns or constant acceleration. Now, these are not all mutually exclusive. There could be combinations of them, or they could be all different. Anybody got any others?
If you rotate your upper body, you end up inside and back. So a lot more pressure on the uphill or inside ski. And then pressure is aft. I don't know if you want that. That's a real good visual cue. And you have most likely that person will have a tip lead too, when the inside leg is.
Yeah, way forward.
Because they
Because they gotta have some effort to get pressure off the inside ski to get it out. So they're pushing
Yeah.
it way forward, kind of like the guy in the picture is doing.
Yeah, there you go. I didn't even look at that. That's exactly what I described. Yeah.
All right.
T-Mac.
Rotation has profound effects on all other fundamentals, probably more so than any other fundamental. But we're going to go with a lot into that in the next, and in part 2. Okay.
That is an awesome video on the left. My God.
That's you, isn't it?
It is
Ooh.
actually. Yeah.
What can
Pull
we
that out of
say?
your personal archive.
That right ski not releasing makes me nervous.
No helmet.
All right. So cues and drills. Anybody got any drills? I got a bunch. I'm gonna
Well,
make you guys do them first.
Feeling the femur turn. I mean, that's the bow ties, right?
That's a good cue, isn't it?
Yeah. And then I have them do, they have them walk in their boots, like a figure 8 around 2 poles.
Yeah. That's a good
And when
one.
they turn around that pole, to make them pay attention to their, what was their outside leg now becomes their inside leg, and how that femur turns to get them turned.
Mhm.
Yeah, I like to have them lay flat on the snow, do the sort of dead bug.
Yeah.
Yeah, feet up in the air.
Because,
Yeah.
feet up in the air, and then you could feel that you cannot rotate the pelvis that way, and you could feel what leg rotation is like independent from the pelvis.
Yeah. Cool. Anything else?
Yeah, similar to what Rebecca said, instead of having them on their back, I get out of my skis and I help them feel that on the snow, kind of a similar, the femur turning inside of the hip socket kind of thing, or try to get as close as possible to that.
Yeah, I do that quite a bit. I also talk about the difference between ice skating and skiing, and I'll say, hey, you got to turn feet. Feet attached to the legs, you got to turn your legs. You know, the difference between skating and skiing is that skiing is the only one where you can still travel sideways. You can't really travel sideways on skates. And so they're like, well, I just stepped from one skate to the other to turn. I go, yeah, but if you needed to, you need to do a tighter arc, you'd have to turn your toes. So I use that quite a bit, especially with beginners, and I'll go through a whole thing with that on beginners, because I think it's that important. So other cues I had were look at the sign down at the bottom of the hill. They definitely got the one where you have to hold the poles out in front of you, even though I don't like that one as much, because I don't think that's as effective, or it's a poor drill for me. Flashlights on your hips. They had quite a few, like arms across the chest like this, or putting your poles across your chest, but you could also put them on your hips, or you could put them on your knees, put it across your shoulders, you could put it across underneath your arms, anything that would help you visualize keeping your body more down the hill, like FWDI says, which is more or less you should have your body pointed mostly down the hill, right? And those are like cues. I know a lot of them from Gelly. Put them on your knees, put them on your feet, put them on your hips, put them on your chest, lower chest, across your shoulders like this. Those are all really good ones. There's another one too I use, which is butterfly drill, where you pull the poles behind your back, and you hold them kind of like that butterfly drill, kind of like this, where the poles are behind your back, and you're kind of sequestered. You can't really move your upper body without.
Gumby, we can't see you, I don't think, or I
No.
can't.
Well,
You're
you can
holding the
also,
poles, you got your poles behind your back, and you kind of make an X shape and kind of come up underneath your arms, and you really can't move anywhere. The whole body has to move like this. That's a really good one. I like that one a lot. I used to use that one quite a bit with racers.
you can also drag both poles. If you're dragging both poles, you've got to stabilize the upper body.
Yeah, I have pole drivers and javelin turns and sorry about the dog. You know how
I
it
think
is.
he wants his
Somebody-
food.
No, there's somebody either is coming up the driveway or he is imagining somebody's coming up the driveway. I also had double pole plants, hop turns, ski moguls without poles. How many of you have done that?
Not recent,
Huh?
not recently.
That's a great drill.
Not willingly.
Nobody wants to do it willingly. They did that quite a bit with me last year. It's like, yeah, Chuck, I think it's a really good time for you to ski without poles. I was like, oh, wonderful.
So how do you do a blocking pole plant without your poles in
You
the
don't.
moguls?
You better be ready.
You'll end up like that skier on the left we just saw.
Exactly. Exactly. This guy. He didn't use his blocking pole plant. It would have kept him upright.
Ooh.
He used his head to block.
All right, you guys got time to see some videos, or you guys sick of me talking?
I have a little bit of time.
All right. Oops, not that one.
Go for it.
All right, well, we got, and all we're going to be looking at is rotation here. So and we're just going to briefly describe what she's doing. Okay. Everybody see it all right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can you shut down the GIF in the background? That's a little distracting.
Thank
you.
So sorry. Here we go. All right, this poor woman here. Rebecca, is this you?
It better not be. If it is, I'm in trouble.
So
Yeah, that's
just briefly,
classic.
somebody describe what she's not doing that she should be.
Is not rotating your legs.
No, not really, right? Oops. Bam.
That's total body rotation.
Yeah, she kind of turns like our 4 and 5-year-olds, doesn't she?
Like a unibody.
The
Mhm.
unibody. And because does everybody see the sequential movement?
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by the sequential movement?
Watch what the skis do.
So the outside ski turns first? What do you mean?
Yeah, the outside ski turns first,
Okay, got it.
more so on one side than the other. Now, that could be intent, or it could be because that's how she moves her upper body.
Mm.
Right. When she turns to the right, that right leg turns quicker.
Really is a wedge Christie.
Yeah, it kind of is, isn't it?
Yeah, the top of the turn is, she wedges that, she turns her right foot first and then she just goes parallel. I guess that's sequential, yeah. It
I
is
don't think
sequential.
she
As soon
ever
as,
really
as soon as you,
gets parallel.
as soon as you see the wedge, then it's sequential. See that?
Mm-hmm. I think she's just taking her time, cruising, having fun, maybe a little high, you know.
Exactly, as she's having fun.
And
Lucky.
I know you're gonna get into this next week, but she really doesn't have a lot of flex in her ankles or knees, which limits her femur
Mhm.
rotation ability, right?
Yes, yes. Yes. Yes, it kind of goes back to that point that we made earlier. If we do not have some leg flex, ankle and knee flex, it's really difficult to have the range of motion we need to make the rotation that we need to.
She's very stiff.
Very stiff. And, you know, we gotta, without asking her directly, what do you think she's thinking when she's making these turns? other than, look how awesome I am. I mean, I'm thinking that she's going, I need to make a turn. And then after the turn's over, I need to make sure that I control my speed,
Mm-hmm,
which makes her defensive.
mm-hmm.
And in order for her to get from, and because she's in the back seat at the end of the turn, because she's defensive, she has to opt to, she can't do leg rotation. She has to use some other tactic to start the turn.
Well, she looks like she's pretty happy doing this. I don't think that she's
Oh,
really like,
Again, all I'm doing is projecting. I can't, without asking her, she may be very happy doing it this way. And with that, and if she was happy doing it this way, Rebecca, and she came to you for a lesson, what would you do?
I would start out maybe by challenging her, maybe upping the terrain so that she would be unhappy and figure out that she needs to get better skills. No, seriously.
Okay. What if
Uh,
she's perfectly happy doing this? Maybe she doesn't want to go to something steeper or more challenging.
Well, then why is she coming to me for a lesson?
That's a very good point.
Uh,
I'd ask her if she'd like to learn how to do it with less fatigue.
Could be.
Ooh.
Yeah. I mean, we really got to kind of do a deep dive into her motivations, don't we?
Yep.
I mean, what does she secretly want? Well, I got a grandchild who's in doing bumps, and it would be cool if I could go do bumps with my grandchild or something like that. Okay, maybe that's going to be a long-term goal. We're not going to get there today, but let's get you into something a little easier so you can feel for it.
I think she wants to meet a male ski instructor.
I'm hoping that's not true.
So her technique works very well in this kind of conditions, but if you've got
Yes.
variable conditions,
Yeah.
she's gonna be thrown off.
It's very, very perfect snow, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
That's great snow.
It's this kind of snow that skis all the time. It's that Cascade concrete, isn't it?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm in California.
Oh, you're in California. I thought you were way up north. I
Yeah,
always think you're in Washington.
yeah, I do go, but I'm based out of Tahoe. So but let's say she shows up, it's a 1 hour lesson. What would you teach her? You have 55 minutes to make a change, one change. What would you change?
Well, if it was rotationally motivated, I would definitely talk about pointing the skis where we need to go.
Well, isn't she doing that already?
Yeah, but is she doing it? Why is she doing it now?
She's making Z-shaped turns, right?
Yeah. For the most part.
So I would, in an hour and 55 minutes, before I ask for my tip, I would, the thing that comes to mind to me is all the stuff that we talked about, right? The terrain.
Mhm.
If she goes in steeper terrain, what will happen? If she encounters some bumps, what will happen? This wouldn't be efficient. So the first thing I would teach her is making a round C-shaped turn.
Mm-hmm.
and how would you do that?
Depending on the person, I would find, I think you said earlier, like maybe get off the steep section here and have something in the greenish easy blue, nice and flat, and have her follow. So, and I give her cadence. 1, 2, 3, 4, turn, 1, 2, 3, 4. Have her say it out loud. Just trying to figure out what kind of learner she is. Maybe just following will do it. Maybe the counting will do it. A combination. I would probably do 4 or 5 turns, her following me, and then I ask her to get in front of me and see if she can do exactly this, not exactly, but can she make rounder turns so I can follow her?
Do you think just talking, and this is probably a bad idea, but in general, about upper body separation from lower body, because maybe she doesn't have any clue on what she's supposed to do, right? And therefore she doesn't know that she wants her body, upper body predominantly downhill and her legs doing the turning.
Well,
Yeah.
but I think when we talk about this, we really have to present exactly what is it that we want them to do. Because to say, oh, well, keep your upper body straight, still and rotate your legs and all that, it's very confusing. And actually, I've been reading a lot about the external versus internal cues in terms of effectiveness, and kind of like maybe tell her point your skis towards the trees and keep your zipper down the fall line, or
Yep.
you need to give concrete directions, because look how much difficulty we had thinking about, okay, what does it mean to rotate, and where does it come from, and the anatomy and all of this. So, like you said, in a 1 hour lesson, how much can you accomplish, and how are you going to do it?
Could
I
you
think I would
teach her?
also ask her if there's, at any point when she's skiing, does she feel that she's not in control?
Yeah, it's a good probing question.
Yeah, very good question.
I mean, I really think we need to do a deep dive into her motivations. It's going to
Yeah.
require some questions.
Um,
Because right now,
may I-
this might be all,
Yes.
this is what she aspires to.
may
Yeah,
I bring
and
up
visually-
something totally different that you guys are talking about? Gumby, you said that earlier that when your legs are straight, you can't, the amount of turning your femur in hip socket gets limited. And then when you flex, you can turn more. That is called closed position and open position in kinesiology, that in theory, when your hip are flexed to 30 degrees, you have the most amount of rotation, internal and external, possible. Now, right now, she's pushing the outside leg out, creating the closed position. So she really can't turn it. So first I'd like to do is to have her shift the weight on the outside leg, creating this base. We need to put her body into a situation she can really turn her leg to turn her skis. And that comes from foot to foot. So assuming we take her back to a little less steep place, that fore aft is not going to be a big issue, that she can bring herself for. Next thing we need to do is for her to understand foot to foot. So I will have her work on foot to foot. Then we got fore aft and foot met. Then we can really, she can, creating her body into being able to turn the skis should be first, before we tell her to do like follow me or point your ski to the trees, because she may not be able to do that with this stance that her weights are inside of the ski, inside skis, then she can't do it. That's how I feel if I only have 60 minutes to ski with her.
Cool, love it. Great explanation. And it was
This
short and
may sound-
concise.
Yeah, this may sound kind of strange, not knowing her motivation, but Could you teach her pivot slips as something that it doesn't look like she has any idea about? And
Well,
therefore,
yeah,
it'd
pivot
be
slips.
fun
She doesn't
fun
really
for her,
create a lot of an edge angle.
right?
Could be.
Yeah, but
be.
I think that Noriko is right, that the first thing we have to do is the fore aft and,
Mhm.
you know, have her have the ankle flexion and be in an athletic stance before we could address rotation. I think that there is kind of an order of priorities. And I think the first priority would probably be to be in the right stance.
Cool.
Mhm.
All right, guys ready to move on to number 2?
Sure.
I gotta go to dinner.
All right,
See you guys.
we'll just do one more and then we'll call it good. I can't believe I got this done in an hour and a half. All
Yeah,
right, so
considering you only had an hour, I think that was pretty good.
I was surprised, trust me. The next one probably won't be that good. So this was kind of the same kind of thing again, isn't it?
Yes and no. I think she's rotating the legs.
She's straightening her outside leg.
She's straightening and twisting her outside leg, isn't she? Oops. I don't think I was ready for that. There we go.
That's really interesting because she's got foot to foot, but it's kind of backward, right? She's moving that inside foot forward.
Yeah. Well, and again, that's kind of like what Ski Mac and I were talking about. That's an effort to get more pressure to the outside ski. They tend to kind of push the leg forward.
Well, also, I think she's just like totally omitting the shaping phase. So she's doing initiation and then whoops, I got to go the other way.
So is this more offensive or defensive?
Defensive.
Yeah.
I think she starts off offensive and then quickly changes.
I think she spends more time sliding than she does turning,
Yeah.
skidding and
Mhm.
skidding and trying to slow down.
Because you see that wedge at a point, and I'm trying to remember what that signified.
Well, she has that's that sequential movement again, right?
That's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah. So what is causing the turning? What
Well,
turns
she's-
first?
The shoulders.
Yeah. So we're back to UBR again, upper body rotation.
Mhm.
And it's kind of like Noriko's point again. She extends that outside leg. It's straight. Her upper body is straight. She's getting a little bit of turning, which means she has a little bit more range of motion, but she's not using any of it. But she's clearly more athletic than the last girl was. So if you had an hour with her, what would you do?
I think with her, some of the things you had suggested, like, you know, putting the hands or putting your poles across or whatever, so that that would keep the upper body stable, I think. Because she's ahead of the other one in terms of her ankles are a little bit more flexed. She does have the capability of rotating the legs, and I think if you can just stabilize the upper body, I think that might get her moving along.
I think we still gotta address the stance, don't we?
Well, I think stance is always the number one issue for,
Yeah. Well, these are level two quality skiers that we're watching, so yes. It's always like the number one thing.
This hill she's on looks a lot steeper than the one before that.
Yeah, I would agree that I think she's a little bit more accomplished than the last girl was.
Mhm.
All right, cool. Any other questions? How'd you guys like the presentation?
Fantastic.
Good, thank you.
fabulous, thank you.
Appreciate your
Jack had
effort.
to go. Rebecca, thank you.
Are you putting it in the chat, or are you sending it out, or you
I
did?
will be definitely sending it out. There's a lot of stuff here, and I want you guys, if there's anything you don't understand, you can email me or go through it again or something like that. I would happy to go ahead and
Well, thank you,
Talk to you about
thank you, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
couple
When
of
is the
weeks,
next one?
whatever 2 weeks is from today.
Oh, 2 weeks. Okay,
And-
very good.
Stay
What do you-
cool, everyone.
Yeah. What are you
day is
planning
that?
in? Is there a part two? You said?
There is a part 2 to this, yes.
Okay.
And it's the one that's gonna be like the complete and utter deep dive into, looks like the 7th.
Yeah.
It's gonna be the 7th of August. Can you believe that August is already here?
No.
Oh my God. I got so much to do. Yeah, so the 7th of August will be gathering again, and I'll go ahead and do the part 2. And part 2 is gonna be very, very biomechanical. Because there's a
Good.
lot of cool stuff to talk about, and why I think that rotation is like the most important fundamental and the most overlooked. So cool. All right. We'll go ahead and
Thank you.
stop recording, and then we'll see you guys. How do I stop this thing?
Great job.
Yeah. And like I said, I hope to see you guys in a